Hello, gorgeous people. It's Leon, your host, and today I get to share with you a lively conversation I had with San Diego wedding photographer David Manning. As of this recording, David has been in the biz for 10 years, and our topic of the day is misconceptions of being a photographer. That's right, we talk about the backhanded compliments and snide remarks people make about our profession as photographers. We also dive into some thoughts about the business of photography, and I think David's advice was fantastic. Enjoy the show. David Manning, thank you so much for joining me.
Good, man. I'm just happy to be here.
Awesome. So let's get a little background on you. What is your thing? Tell us about yourself, what you do for work, what you do for fun, where you live, all that good stuff.
Gosh. San Diego based, born in Ohio. So I was a Midwest kid, still kind of consider myself a Midwest kid, but came out to San Diego when I was like 12 years old. So I've been here for over 20 years. Started shooting photography about 10 years ago. Actually almost on the dot 10 years ago.
Wow.
March 15th of this year was 10 years since I second shot a wedding.
Wow.
Before that, I was just kind of, dabbling. I owned a coffee shop really randomly.
Did you really?
Yeah, out of high school, I had an opportunity to own a coffee shop, so I went for it. And kind of just dabbled in photography, played around a lot. And then I met Sarah France at it was a pug meetup, if you remember. Yes. Pictage.
Oh, yeah.
And I met her. We hit it off real quick, and she invited me to second shoot a wedding. And she must have just been really confident in her skills, because I was shooting on a Canon 40D with what was that lens? A 28 to 135 f4, something like that. I think I had one lens. I think that was it. And she brought me along on a wedding, and dude, I just fell in love. So 10 years ago, and then 1 year later is when I shot my first wedding. So it's been 9 years. This last March was my first wedding as a wedding photographer.
How cool to have somebody to believe in you so much. I know you're being, I know you're being modest and, humble, saying that she had great confidence in her skills, but I see that as her having great confidence in your skills as well. To bring somebody on who's got, kind of a baseline camera and one lens to second shoot with them, I think she probably saw great potential. So it's cool to hear that you had a, kind of a mentor, somebody to bring you under their wing and show you how they do things. And I'm sure that was a good experience. Sarah's an awesome person, and we've crossed paths several times. Awesome. Yeah, she's an amazing soul. So
it's funny. Cool. She's become like one of my best friends. Her fiance was my best man. Sarah, me and my wife are her daughter's godparents.
Oh, that's great.
Kind of, 10 years later, still in the fold.
That's amazing. Okay, so you were at a pug meeting, met Sarah France. So there had to have been something to spark your interest in photography and wedding photography specifically. So how did you make that jump from coffee shop, whatever was going on in between, to, hey, I have a camera, I'm going to start shooting weddings and be part of this community?
To attribute it to someone else, Ryan Ross, my good buddy. I was working at a church, and I was working at a church as a middle school, media guy. I led worship, things like that. Cool. And he was the middle school pastor, and he was like, oh, dude, you got to check out this guy, David J. And, so
famous.
Which flashes it way back too. Yeah. And I looked him up, and he was like traveling the world shooting weddings, and I was like, dude, that is sweet, man. That's something I could get into. And my dad had kind of been pushing me, saying, giving me the whole "you gotta love what you do" talk, that kind of thing. Mm-hmm. And I was like, man, I love photography. I'd love to figure out how to make it work. And started shooting a lot of other stuff. Shot surfing, things like that I knew, skateboarding, my friends. And then Ryan kind of got the bug in my ear about weddings, which got me to sign up for Pictage. Or not, I don't think I even signed up for Pictage at the time. I think that I just had heard about the pugs. Mm-hmm. So and then one of Ryan's mutual friends, Jeff Youngren, Ryan put me in touch with him, and he was like, oh, you should come out for it. It was when they were still held at Jeff and Aaron's place down in Mission Valley. And that's how it all started. After my first wedding, I was just like, I was sold.
That's awesome. Yeah. That's great. Is it possible that you and I actually met at one of the pug meetings?
Oh, absolutely. I'm sure. Yeah, sure.
I remember speaking about post-production one time at one of the pugs.
Yeah, was that at their house when they in Carmel Valley?
Yeah, exactly. I bet we were in the same room, man.
Probably. That probably happened.
That's hilarious. All right, so today's topic, here's what we're talking about. We're talking about common misconceptions about photographers. And I mean, you've been in the biz longer than a lot of people. I see a lot of people come into wedding photography, and unfortunately, they only last maybe 2 or 3 years, and then they just kind of burn out. You've been at it for 10 years, which is substantial. That's outstanding. Good job. High fives to you. So I bet there are a lot of things that you've heard people say. So I want to talk about 2 perspectives of misconceptions about photographers, or the work that photographers do. So there's 2 perspectives that I see. Number one is there are things that people say to you, maybe their clients or maybe their friends, and it just indicates that they really have no idea what it's like to be a photographer. And then there's another perspective that I want to dive into, which are observations that you've discovered after being in business for a while. Like think back to, early days watching David J's stuff and checking out his work. What were some of the things that you thought wedding photographers did and then maybe realized was different later on? So let's jump into number 1, things that people have said that indicate they really have no idea. Do you have some stories?
Yeah, well, I mean, like I was telling you off air, most of my friends are not photographers. I have a lot of friends that are entrepreneurs, but not a lot of photographer friends. Mm-hmm. So I get it a lot that I don't really have much of a job. They go, how many weddings a year you shoot? And like 25 weddings a year. Oh, so you work like 25 days a year and that's it? That's probably the most common one that I hear from the outside looking in. And I think just kind of the to debunk that myth, probably, and this is what I tell a lot of people that are getting into it as well, is, man, photography is probably, unfortunately, photography is maybe 10% of my job. And I tell kids that are going, hey, I want to be a photographer too. What should I go to photography school? And I tell everyone, I'm like, man, go to business school. If you want to get a degree in something, get your degree in business. Mm-hmm. Photography, I think, is something that, if you got the eye for it, there's just a wealth of resources out there that are free, mostly free, or super cheap in comparison to college education, where you can really get good at photography and learn photography. But 90% of this business and lasting in this business, which is kind of what you were mentioning earlier, is business.
Totally. I totally agree with that. And I see so many, I have an editing business, so I talk to new photographers in the biz all day long. And that's one of the common things that I see is that they've got maybe an amazing skill, right? Like they're able to create and craft beautiful images. Yet they have so many questions and unknowns about the business side of things. And I've seen brilliant photographers who I thought were rising stars and were going to make it big completely fade away just into ether because they don't understand the business side of things. They don't understand what's involved, but they also don't have a passion for the business side. They want to create art. They don't really necessarily want to do the numbers and the accounting. And that's why I really encourage people to educate themselves on, finding their strengths and playing to their strengths and building their business around their strengths and then hiring people to help them in those other areas that they're not so strong in. So that's an amazing observation that maybe 10% of your job is actually being a photographer, actually shooting. What are some of the things? I mean, obviously there's a whole wide range of photographers in different parts of their career who might be listening, but what are some of the things that just come to mind that you do throughout the week that have nothing to do with putting a camera in your hand? Yeah,
there's a ton. And just real quick to put a kind of a bow on that last point is like, I think that there's not enough number 2s in our industry. And there's nothing wrong with being a number 2. If you're a number 2 kind of guy, I think Gary Vaynerchuk talks about this a lot. Being an entrepreneur is one thing, and that's the business side. It's all the accounting, and like, to your point right now, there's accounting, there's emails, there's follow-up, there's website stuff, there's making sure your social media is on point, there's follow-up emails, there's you're tracking 25 different projects during a year that are all at different points in the process. So there's a lot of stuff to do. And then there's the photography. There's the going out and taking pictures. If you're someone that's just passionate in photography, I would encourage someone to reach out to a photographer and say, hey, would you be interested in taking me on as maybe an associate? I think that there's kind of an ego issue in our industry in general where no one wants to be the number two. No one wants to say, hey, I'm just a photographer and I work for this studio. I think that's kind of rare. Most people start at a studio and they see it as a stepping point for launching their own business.
Right.
And man, I just think that more people are great. I can think of a couple in my head that I'm like, man, if that person just came on under me as a photographer, I could get them out and get them just working constantly, and all they would do is shoot photos. They wouldn't have to deal with all the other stuff.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, a normal week for me is not so much editing anymore. I've outsourced that a good bit. A ton of emails.
Yeah.
And even it was just one client before getting them booked, I usually see at least maybe 10 solid emails. Yeah. And if an email takes you 15, 20 minutes to sit down and write, that's taking up some good bit of time each job. You multiply that out by 25. Those are the ones you booked. You multiply that by how many inquiries you got or how many that you chased down and you didn't get.
Yeah.
And a ton of time is just spent behind the keys.
For sure. All right. So what are some other things that people have said, or maybe, comments that you've heard that indicate they really just don't get it?
Oh man, the number one thing and it used to irritate me a lot more than it does now. I think I've gotten over it a good bit, just in taking that perspective of like, this person doesn't know what they're talking about. But definitely at first, someone would look at a picture and they go, oh, dude, that's such a sweet camera.
Yes.
Just kind of that whole, a nice camera doesn't make the photographer sentiment that you hear a lot.
Yeah. There's I don't know, I can't remember who created it, but there's an online store for photographers. They make cool little, photographer related gear and shirts and mugs and stuff like that. Yeah. And one of their quotes is, what a nice camera, it must take great pictures. Yeah. And the response is, yes, I taught it everything it knows. Which I think is just a great insight. Yeah. Like people look at the camera and they're like, whoa, that must take great pictures. And, it's true. I think a lot of people look at the camera, they look at the lens. It looks nothing like they've ever owned. Mm-hmm. It just looks totally foreign and they just think.
And the picture looks nothing like they've ever taken.
Right, so exactly.
Go, yeah. If only I had that camera.
Yeah, well, it is true. I mean, here's a funny thing. Okay, so it is true that if you hand someone the camera, those photos that they actually take will be nicer than anything they've ever taken, for sure. Like, for example, the other day I was shooting at a local jiu-jitsu school where I train and I do their social media, and there were a couple of kids there. They were the kids of a special guest, a world-class athlete who had come to do a seminar, and his kids were hanging around. They were bored, and I was taking pictures of them, and I handed them my camera, a 1DX with a 50 millimeter on it. And I just said, take some pictures. Take some pictures of your brother, whatever. They walked around and took some pictures, and they looked amazing. Well, like half of that is the fact that I've got my manual settings dialed in exactly where I want them for that environment. Yeah. So in one sense, I get it. Yes, the camera does contribute a lot, but there's a lot that goes into using those tools, right? They're just tools in your hands, right?
Yeah, and I mean, there's like stepping points. I think you pick up your first 50 millimeter, 1.2, or even 1.4. Man, you're just like, game changer, game changer. Like I am taking good photos now.
Yep.
But man, you see the things that people create with iPhones. And it's just unreal.
It is. Yeah.
And then you see the terrible photos people create with an iPhone also, and you're like, oh, well.
Yeah.
Or even with that terrible photos that people take with the DSLR.
I know. You know what is interesting, though? What I've loved to see over the years that I've been in the photography industry. So in short, I got my start in the early 90s as a photographer. And so I've been able to watch this whole film to digital transition. And, in the old days, it was like, if you wanted to be a wedding photographer, you were blowing like $20,000 to get your SLR, your lenses. You might mix in a medium format camera in there with lenses. And it was just insanely expensive. So there was this huge barrier. Now, you can walk into any electronics store, or even Target for that matter, and buy a pretty decent DSLR for, a few $100 and be taking great photos because it's a DSLR and you have manual controls and you have, more lens options and stuff like that. So I love that the barrier has kind of come down, but it has created some of this, misperception that, all I really need is just to have a good camera and then I can edge out my photographer because I've got a good camera now.
Yeah, I think digital also brought on kind of this wave of new photographers. This huge amount, and we see it every year. A ton of new photographers pop up in the industry, and like you said before, they last maybe a year, 2 years, 3 years, and then they're gone. And I think a lot of that is because people see a camera like that and they go, "Oh, if I can only buy that camera, then I could be a photographer."
Yeah,
and unfortunately, it takes a lot more than just the camera. It takes a lot of it is that it's that business side of things. It's you can take great photographs. That's awesome. But if your business side isn't on point, then you're not going to last.
Totally. Have you ever had a client say something during a shoot or maybe after a shoot? Super common. But have you ever had somebody say this, and how did you feel the question? The client says, "We can just fix that in Photoshop, right?"
Oh my gosh. I wrote that down as one of my...
Perfect.
That was one of the things that I was going to mention was, it's... And it's true. You can fix a lot in Photoshop.
Right.
I think that people think that there's an easy button though for Photoshop. And, we charge usually around $25 to $50 an hour for Photoshop work to be done. So if someone later on is like, "Hey, we love this image, but we want this, and this changed, or this and this, mixed up, or hey, we need that huge thing taken out, and then we'd like to make this a canvas." Man, it still takes a good bit of work, and Photoshop's making it easier. The barrier to things on Photoshop has come down quite a bit in the years, but it's still a good bit of work. You could sit down on one image and you could spend an hour or two getting it perfect.
Totally. I think that one of the biggest, one of the best ways maybe to field that suggestion from clients is a price. Because I see so many photographers come to me as an editing service and say, "Hey, my client's asking if this is possible. What can we do?" And then I'll say, "Yeah, it's definitely possible, but it's going to cost, $50, $60 or something." Because pretty intense work, what they want. Yeah. And a lot of times the photographers come back and they say, "Oh, yeah, I don't really have the budget to eat that." And they're not really, I didn't really prep them on having to pay for this kind of work. So I don't know. I think I might just have to do it myself. But I think, just being honest and providing that value to the client is actually a great service to them when you can say, "Hey, you know what? It's definitely possible. Let me talk to my Photoshop guy or my Photoshop girl or whatever. And, let me talk to my editor and see what we can do. And I'll get you a quote." Say that to the client because that makes it a very obvious. It makes it a very obvious transaction. It's not a favor. It's, it's conveying to them that there's actual time involved. There's actual skill involved in this. And if you want it done, sure, but it's going to cost you. And I think the other thing about Photoshop, even when it comes to, just being an editor or Photoshop retoucher, there's this mentality too that we have kind of adopted over the years. And it's that, just because we can do it in Photoshop doesn't mean we should do it in Photoshop. We've all seen the kind of wildly creative trends come and go, the over processing and the over stylizing of images. Just because it's possible to do that, or it's possible to put in a new background or a new sunset or something like that, doesn't mean that we actually should, because in my opinion, if it's a portrait, okay, and we're trying to go for realistic, then it doesn't always serve us well, right? If it doesn't look realistic, then I think it's kind of a fail. So anyway, yes. So what other things have people said to you, either friends, family, clients, that's on your mind about misconceptions?
Gosh, so many. A big one is why we charge so much. That's another huge one that I hear a lot. People ask that, I think, right away, is like, "Well, yeah, how much does like a normal wedding cost?" And you tell them, $4,000 or $5,000, and they go, "Oh my gosh, just for for like a day of work. That's
just
it.
for pushing a button.
Yeah, that's all you're doing. I think again, it's because they don't see the other 90%. They don't see.
Right.
I mean, even just the editing process. I think a lot of people think, why does it take 2-3 weeks for me to get my images back?
Mm-hmm.
Why does it take so long? It's like, well, if I'm delivering you 800 images, even if I'm spending a minute or two on each image,
right,
to get it right, that adds up. That's a good bit of time.
Exactly.
And you're working in 25 weddings a year and all that stuff. And, so I think that the kind of why do you charge so much thing is out there a lot. I hear that from most of my friends, not a lot of my clients anymore, but most of my friends.
So they must have this misconception that because it's digital, there's no real overhead to you anymore. There's no real effort involved. You're really just pointing a camera in a direction and pushing the button, right? But they're forgetting how much goes into the years of training that you've put into this, the experimentation, the cost of the gear. I mean,
the gear investment is painful. We just picked up a new MacBook Pro for $4,000.
Yeah,
we're going, dang, that one hurt.
Exactly.
That's painful.
Yes,
but divided up amongst a bunch of jobs over the next few years, it makes sense. It works for us.
Yeah. Hey, a quick break just to let you know that this show is brought to you by Essential Edit, editing and design for photographers just like you. Yes, Lightroom editing, retouching, and album design, all done to your spec, your style, so that you can focus on the essentials of your business. Instead of dreading the edit, spend that time booking more clients, networking with vendors, or spending more time with the people you love. It's super affordable, 3 to 5 day turnaround, friendliest service on the planet, and yes, satisfaction is always guaranteed. Let's get you started. Send us some sample images at essentialedit.com. Enjoy the rest of the show. Are there observations that you discovered after being in the biz for a while? So maybe when you were in your first year or two, think back to the early days of your photography career. What were some things that you thought about wedding photographers and that maybe changed later on?
Oh, interesting. Oh gosh, I think I had a lot of weird, mainly because my initial perception was David J,
Right.
I was looking at him going,
let's look back at him, because David J is a great example, right? Because I think a lot of people looked at David J and they're like, whoa, dude's driving fast cars, big house on the hill in Santa Barbara. It was pretty cushy looking, right?
Absolutely.
That's we could even just start with that, going like, wow, that's possible as a wedding photographer. And it is true that that's possible as a wedding photographer, but I don't think most wedding photographers roll like that. Would you agree?
Yeah, absolutely. And a big thing about that though is that I think that, a lot of us get into it thinking, oh, it's going to be, easy money. And again, it's that I think most people run up against that wall where it's business and they go, I can't raise my prices above $1,500. If I try to charge more than $1,500, no one's going to pay for it.
Right.
That has a lot to do with, finding your niche in the market and being able to grow within the market. And a lot of those are business concepts and business things that get you ahead. And when you look at how he grew and how he got to that point, it's because he was really smart, business minded. He's even left photography and launched multiple other businesses. Right. So it just kind of shows you his thing is business. And at that point in his career, he was focused on being a photographer. So his business was photography, and now his business is something else. But he's a good businessman. And that's why I think he kind of got there. So I think, from the outside looking in, and especially from, the early days, it was like, oh, this is easy money. And I think maybe I thought probably the same thing as a new photographer was, I'm going to go out, I'm going to shoot, someone's going to give me $1,500. That's it. My first wedding, I charged $1,500. That was it.
And here's the interesting side note to the business of photography, right? I think a lot of people, I think you could generalize and say a lot of people either earn an hourly wage in the workforce. We're just talking about the general workforce, not photographers. In the general workforce, people earn either an hourly wage or a salary. And that means pretty steady income. You can pretty much count on what you're going to make per month, per week, whatever. So you can calculate your life, you can calculate your finances. But as a photographer, you have no idea how many weddings you're going to book next year.
I always joke with my wife. I go, honey, I'm unemployed as of June of next year. That's as far as I've got weddings booked. I don't have a job past then.
It's so true. It's a deal with joke. The unreliable income or the, spikes, the peaks and valleys, right? You've got, maybe a couple months worth of bookings and things feel really good. And then you have that slow part where it feels depressing. So that's something I think that a lot of people aren't prepared for when they become a wedding photographer, right? Would you agree?
And yeah, absolutely. And I think a lot of that, is like financial awareness and knowing, again, your first, second, even third year, you're probably not, you don't know where those dips and valleys are going to come during the year. So you're not ready for them. And all of a sudden you're going, okay, we're eating noodles this week.
Totally.
Like, it's ramen and mac and cheese. That's all. Because you didn't prepare for it. And, now we're in, I know that I can support my wife and I for this year because I can say, hey, I know we have money coming in here, here, and here. We're going to budget properly so that flows over and we don't, one month we go, hey, we got 15 grand. Let's go crazy.
Totally.
And the next month we don't have anything coming in. So we gotta prepare for those things and spread it out properly. But I think that's probably a big one that people leave the industry, probably any industry, I think, is knowing your numbers. Knowing your numbers is so, so important. Know how much, why are you charging what you're charging? If you can't go into a spreadsheet and say, hey, my hours take me this much, I'm going to spend this much on gear. I want to buy a new lens this year and that's going to depreciate over this many years. Like, you have to know those numbers to really see that you're making money. Because a lot of people, when you break it down, you're like, hey, you're making $15 an hour, man. Or you're making $10 an hour. If you're going out, you're shooting a wedding, you're shooting engagement sessions, and then you're spending, 20 hours editing a wedding or something like that. It's like, gosh, you're not making anything.
There was a great blog post that was put out a few years ago. I'm going to see if I can go find it and put it in the show notes. If I can find it, I'll put it in the show notes. But maybe you read it. There was somebody who actually did all the math on the business of being a wedding photographer. And basically they led with the headline of, you're better off working at McDonald's than being a wedding photographer. Something like that, something more eloquent. But essentially, they took a look at what the common pricing is for a wedding photographer, just kind of took some average numbers across the board and did the math and realized that you're actually making less as a wedding photographer than you would having a full-time job at McDonald's, which was really sad to see.
Such a bummer. But that's probably pretty common in our industry. I mean, there's one of my good buddies, Jeremy. He was a scientist and he was a photographer part-time. And now he left photography entirely and is just working on stuff. And for him, it was because as a scientist and a very spreadsheet aware guy, he broke it down. And he actually, when he went into client meetings, he had zero room to negotiate. This is my number, and it's my number for a very specific reason.
Right.
I know exactly how much time it's going to take me. I know exactly how much my gear, everything costs. He had it, just an amazing spreadsheet. And when he left photography, what he told me was this. He said, man, if you don't charge, and this doesn't apply to all markets. We're in San Diego, so we have a very high cost of living, things like that. But his breakdown, I think, was $3,500. Was his, like, if you're not charging at least $3,500 for a wedding, you're making beans.
Yeah.
You have to charge this much to make a living, and it's going to be uncomfortable and it's going to be hard, but that's like your point where it starts making sense to become a photographer.
Yeah.
So when you see people that come in and they're like, hey, we're going to charge, $1,000, $1,500, even $2,000 for a wedding. If you're doing that for 2-3 years, it's kind of not, it's unsustainable.
Right.
And that's, I think, a big reason that you see a lot of people coming and going is they don't know their numbers. They don't realize how little they're making off of things. They're going out and doing what was it back in the day? Groupon. Remember when Groupon popped up and everyone was like,
goodness.
$50 sessions, family sessions. And then they would book 500 sessions and go out of business immediately.
Such a disaster.
You can never do 500 sessions this year. It's impossible. You don't have enough time or, manpower to do it. And you're making no money on it. So I think when people don't know their numbers in any industry, but especially in photography, because it's such it seems like such a subjective number, our pricing, it seems like why this guy charges $4,000 and this guy charges $7,000 just because.
Right. I like what you said there, though. You mentioned your friend who is a real numbers guy, scientist, how he had specific numbers and he would go into a consultation knowing that he has no room to negotiate. Because I hear so many photographers complain and talk about online about this issue of negotiators and people who want a deal and friends who want a deal on their wedding photography and stuff like that. And I think you're right. I think having a very good sense of your numbers and exactly what it takes to be a profitable, sustainable business makes you confident in the consultation so that you don't waver, so that you don't get emotional about it, because it's really just about the numbers. And if you want to be a nice guy and figure out how to, negotiate, I think the most successful people I've seen in photography don't negotiate to get a lower price. They actually start creating more value to the client. They find other ways to actually get them to spend more money. It's not being manipulative. It's not being tricky. You're not, doing anything unethical, but they find ways to provide more and more value to the client where they realize, you know what? I'm actually willing to spend a little more than I originally intended because I see the value of hiring David to shoot my wedding now. And I see what he's going to give me in regards to, coverage and hours and album or whatever you decide is your value added to the,
a value add I think is huge. And there's a lot of ways to add value that, because even when you think of trading on cost, if a canvas cost me, let's say a canvas costs me $60 to make, but I sell those for $275. I can offer somebody to add a canvas on, and really I'm only losing $60. I'm not losing $275, but they feel it as $275. You feel it as $60. So there's a lot of value adds like that work. But honestly, and this is going to be very unpopular with almost every photographer, I absolutely negotiate price. I think that it's something that as humans we're so attuned to. We even like silly things like don't price your package at $4,000, price it at $3,950. That sounds so silly, and it's like, oh gosh, doesn't that just make you look like a product? Well, that's what people are used to buying.
Right.
People are used to going into a store and seeing something that costs $14.99 and not $15.
Right.
And there is that.
It looks odd, doesn't it?
It looks odd, but man, it feels like you're paying $14 for it and you're not paying $15.
Exactly.
Or $20. I mean, $19.99 feels great. $20 feels icky.
Right, because you lose the whole $20 bill.
Yeah, you're like,
$19.99, I still have a little something.
That's right. And it's just a mind game. I mean, obviously you're spending the same amount, but it's kind of, there's that mind game that goes in. So even when I can go in, and this is, again, it's not a trick. It's just business, and every business does this. Whether you're buying a car or you're buying whatever you're buying. Yeah. There's room for discount. And if you don't price that into your model, then when that comes up, you've lost out. Yeah. When you do come up against a client who's like, look, we're just looking to save, $300-400. Yeah. If you can give that $300-400 to them, and that means you're going to book a $5,500 package. Well, dang, man. I mean, easy. Of course. Yeah. Like, I'm in. Yeah. And having that priced into my packages. So in my pricing models that I've broken down, I have, there's a little room for discounts, and there's gifting as well. So there's nice. Certain gifts that I like to give to my clients, and that's already worked into my numbers. So I don't feel pain when I discount a little bit, and I don't feel pain when I do these things that are for people or for my clients. So I know it's such like maybe it's an ego thing that photographers get so bent out of shape on when someone asks for a discount. But I see it all the time. There's plenty of Facebook groups where photographers go to gripe, and that's one of the major gripes that I hear from photographers. Is like, I can't believe they asked for a discount on my art.
Yeah, totally. Well, I think here's part of the mentality I think that I wish more photographers would adopt. I wish that they would. I wish that they would not run their business with their emotions. You know what I mean? I mean, you mentioned Gary Vaynerchuk a little earlier. Love Gary V, love the stuff that he teaches. And that's one of his things. He's like, I'm not emotional about business. I'm not going to let it ruin my emotions or run it emotionally. I'm going to make business decisions based on whether or not it's a good idea or bad idea. And I see so many photographers who just get the wind knocked out of them when somebody says, I can't afford that. Can you do a little bit better? And they just don't know how to do it. So I'm okay if people want to negotiate pricing. I just don't want them to curl up in a ball in the corner and cry the rest of the day because somebody asked for a discount. Like have a plan and set up your business in a way that if that happens, which is going to happen, if that happens and you're prepared for it and you know how to navigate that conversation instead of just becoming emotional about it and just like feeling like you're failing, right?
Yeah, that's probably something that comes with 10 years in now. It's like I've had almost every conversation. There's very few conversations that I have now where I'm like, oh my gosh, I can't believe they asked for that.
Right.
So I've kind of, I think that when I'm a big on expectations. I'm big on setting expectations and developing my own expectations so that I know how I'm going to handle a situation. So for instance, early on with the, how many images are you going to deliver? When am I going to get things? Stuff like that. All that is sent out to my couples ahead of time. They know how much it would cost to Photoshop something. So if they say, nice. Hey, I actually want 6 images Photoshopped, I go, awesome. I'll put that order in for you. We'll get those done. So they know all that stuff ahead of time, which alleviates a lot of those kind of funkiness. Right. And I know a lot of what people are going to ask me. And I already, not pre-thought out quite, but I've thought about it. I know how I'm going to answer. I know how I'm going to respond. So things like discounts, I say, awesome. Hey, I want to make it work for you guys. I want you to feel super comfortable and feel like you're getting the full value. I want you to think, I don't want you to write a check to me and be like, oh, this hurts. I want you to be like, yes, this feels great.
Yeah.
I'm so excited that I'm, spending this much money on my photographer, even though I saved some of my florist will be mad at me. Save some of my florals or save some of my invitations. I'm so excited that I really made photography my priority. Yeah. And look, if that number is $300-$400 off, I don't want to have a client not go with me.
Right.
And it's honestly at that point, it's not even a business decision. A lot of my things are, I want to help my clients.
Yeah.
I feel if I connect with them and I feel like, man, I would be good for these people. Like I know the skill set that I bring would really help their day. I want to make that work. I want to figure out how to make that work. And if we're off by a small enough number to where I feel good about it, they feel good about it, there we go. Nice.
Good stuff, man. And with that, I think let's wrap it up. I want to know, just tell the people, how can we find you? What's your website, your socials, anything you want to shout? What are you working on? What are you up to? How can people connect with you?
Easiest way is davidmanningphotographer.com. Really easy. Most socials, I'm David_Manning. So Instagram, Twitter, Snapchat, all that stuff. David_Manning. And I'm starting to vlog. That's kind of the latest and greatest thing is I've been playing with vlogging, which you cannot find on YouTube yet, really, because it doesn't have a name yet. You need 100 subscribers to have a name.
Oh, really?
And I've got 84, so I'm working on it. And
well, all right, we've got to get you to 100 then. We've got to get you there. So everybody listening, go find David Manning's vlog channel on YouTube. By the way, I have watched a couple of episodes, not in full, but man, I got to tell you, they look so pro. They look amazing. Really good work.
Yeah, I'm learning a lot. I'm not a video guy by any means, so I'm kind of just documenting the journey, and hopefully one day I'll look back and look at these vlogs and be like, I was so bad then.
Well, you're off to a great start. I think if you stick with this for 2, 3, 4 years, you'll look back and you'll realize how you could have made things better. But you're off to a really good start with that stuff. So congrats on that. Yeah. All right, David, thank you so much for your time today. Yeah. And man, let's do this again. This was fun.
I'm in anytime.